Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. I am Pam Wilshire, I'm the Secretary of Merseyside Civic Society, and I'd like to welcome you to this Lessons from the North East, the 1825 Stockton Darlington Railway talk. This is the first MCS Zoom we've done for a while, to be honest. Takes me back to COVID days. So please bear with us if we don't get all the technology quite right. We're doing our best. It's great to see so many familiar faces, but also good to welcome many people who I don't recognise, and you're very welcome. And there's lots of people from community and railway heritage groups who have not really previously had much interaction with ourselves. So thank you for coming, and we hope you will enjoy it. And you are, of course, most welcome. If you want to get more involved with things that Merseyside Civic Society is doing, and you're not actually joined up as a member of Merseyside Civic Society, please go on to our website, which is merseysidecivicsociety.org, and you can join in a very simple online form, and it costs nothing. Our next event is actually on the 14th of November, which is our AGM, and we have the Culture Liverpool director, Claire McColgan, talking about the impact of major events in Merseyside over the last 20 years. That'll be quite interesting. And that's a live event on the 14th of November at Reba North at Mile Island at the Pier Head. And it starts at 6 o'clock, 5:30 for a glass of wine. So that's my little plug for Merseyside Civic Society. The information about that is not quite live yet. It will be coming out to our members next week. Just a few bits of housekeeping before we get cracking. I am recording the session, and all being well, I'll be able to include the recording in our next newsletter that goes to our members, probably at the end of November, that sort of time. And quite a few of us are here, so please use the chat box to ask any questions. We can't really have people sort of butting in, if you like. It's just not going to work. So use the chat box and put your questions in, and we'll try and cover as many of the questions as it's possible to. We hope to be joined, I'm not sure, I can see here yet. Oh yes, Julie Griffiths, who is from Historic England Northwest, is with us. Thanks, Julie, for waving at us. Julie's the partnership team leader in the Northwest for Historic England. So thanks very much for coming along, and hopefully in the Q&A you'll be able to respond to any questions which are relevant to Historic England, if that's okay. Thank you very much for coming. So I'm now going to introduce you to our speaker today. Our speaker is Niall Hammond. Niall is an archaeologist and heritage consultant with over 30 years experience. Following a career in fieldwork with, amongst others, the Museum of London, Niall held the post of County Archaeologist for Durham with responsibility for planning, advice, heritage, databases and archaeological archives and museum collections. He was subsequently the Senior Listing Buildings Advisor to the Ministry of Defence across the UK estate. He now works across the UK as an independent consultant, and his recent work has included wind farms, regeneration of Folkestone Harbour, and conservation management plans for the National Trust. Niall is a member of the Chartered Institute for Archaeology and part of the Specialist Advisory Network of the National Trust. He was a member of the National Lottery Heritage Fund North Regional Committee for 8 years and is currently chair of the Friends of the Stockton and Darlington Railway, CIO. So over to you, Niall. All right, need to unmute.
Success. Yeah, great.
Yes.
Thought for a minute I was going to have to do this through the medium of mime and dance, but never mind. Thanks very much, Pam. It's nice to be with everybody today. What I'll do is I'll hopefully just talk at you for the next 30 minutes or so. If you want to pop questions in the chat box, like Pam has said, please do. Otherwise, I'm sure Pam will field Q&A when we get to the end of this. So if the technology will work, we shall. Right. Hopefully everybody can see that. Is that, Pam, can you see the?
Yeah, it looks pretty good to me. Yeah,
Right.
good.
Okay, we shall crack off then. So, almost 10 years ago, I somewhat naively attended an open meeting in Darlington, organised by some local councillors, concerned that as a town and a region, we were showing little care and respect for the Stockton Darlington Railway, its physical remains and heritage. This was not just an issue of heritage at risk, but importantly, a missed opportunity to take advantage of an internationally recognised story of engineering innovation and excellence, which we could and should be using to inspire local education, business and economy. Why was I naive 10 years ago? Well, ladies and gentlemen, my first lesson from the Northeast today is that making the most of heritage, such as the SNDR, and indeed the LMR, will require not just significant financial and staff resources from local authorities and national agencies, but the commitment and passion of volunteers who will find it consuming much of their waking and quite a few of their sleeping hours. Back in 2013, we laughingly joked that in the 1820s, it only took the directors of the SNDR 7 years to get 2 acts of parliament, design and build the railway. Surely with 12 years in hand, we could get everything in place for the bicentenary in 2025. Well, not quite. "10 years on, I'm now chair of the Friends of the SNDR, a registered charity established in 2018, who together with a wide body of partners work to research, conserve and care for the history and built heritage of the line, both for the 2025 bicentenary and to ensure a legacy for the years after this of continued conservation, access, educational and community work and involvement. While much has been achieved, there is still an awful lot left to do, and I offer the following not as a template for how the Liverpool and Manchester might be conserved and celebrated in 2030, but as guidance and inspiration for what you might do and how you might do it. In a small way, the sharing experience that went on between the Northeast and the Northwest in the late 1820s, when we indeed built our railways. So first, a very short potted history, a challenge in the time available. There were, of course, railways and steam locomotives before the SNDR, and a key part of our work has been to make sure any claims to fame are well founded on sound research. We made a point early on of trying to avoid using the F word, not that one, but first, if at all possible, and seeing the SNDR rather than the first of things as part of an evolutionary story of tramways, railways and steam locomotives in the opening years of the 19th century, not as something appearing out of nowhere. Before the SNDR opened, railways at Tanfield, Kilmarnock and Troon, Swansea and Mumbles, Wylam, Middleton, Killingworth, Hetton, and indeed several others, all saw major steps forward in railway design and engineering, but each in their own way were limited in scope and ambition, and importantly, had limited influence beyond engineering and industrial audiences. The technology used was often a dead end, and they had little aspiration or vision to be anything more than a simple A to B method of transporting a single or limited commodity, often for a single private owner. From the decision to build a railway on the SNDR in 1818 through to its opening in 1825, the SNDR developed differently. It was a public railway, admittedly not the first, facilitated by an Act of Parliament which allowed compulsory purchase of land to build the line, and because of its public status was both able and required to carry anything for anybody for a fee. In its 2 enabling Acts of Parliament in 1821 and 1823, it set out the template for the modern railway. These read almost like a manifesto of what a railway can be and provide far more detail than was really needed, providing an extraordinarily long list of commodities from minerals to agricultural products, manufactured goods to passengers. And steam locomotives were added in 1823, and all along a main line and branches, totaling some 40 miles or so. Its leading lights all had ambitions, with Francis Mewburn, the S&D solicitor, noting at the opening of the Croft branch line in 1829 that it wouldn't be long before people could lunch in Darlington and go to the opera in London the same evening. So in its first 5 years, the SNDR made decent profits and proved the concept of a standard gauge, locomotive-powered rail transport, creating the first railway towns at Shildon and Middlesbrough, stations and ways of operating a modern railway. Often flawed, sometimes amazingly amateurish and downright dangerous on occasion, the SNDR, while not the polished article, inspired and influenced with an amazingly generous open source sharing of technical innovations, visiting engineers and businessmen from Germany, from France, from the USA, and yes, some cotton merchants in Liverpool and Manchester, who all went on within a few years to spread the worldwide railway revolution, which changed the face of the world in the 19th century and continues to connect people and places today. All of the innovation of the late 18th and early 19th century had to lead to the modern railway being invented somewhere. The SNDR is a case of right place, right time, and right people. Stevenson, George and Robert, the Pease family, Quaker financiers in London, the Midlands and East Anglia, availability of malleable iron rails, market forces, the application of technical and engineering excellence, and the financial and logistical planning married to an ability to evolve and innovate meant that it just happened to happen in County Durham. Above all, the SNDR made good on a vision unlike any that had gone before. This was not a short-term, one-function, technically flawed piece of infrastructure with a limited time span. Instead, this was the start of something much bigger, a main line with branches which would grow and evolve, forming connections, opportunities, and carry anything, not just coal, for anyone. Legacy and recognition are interesting concepts, and from the preservation of locomotion number 1 in 1856, through to major celebrations sponsored by the North East Railway in 1875, who'd subsumed the SNDR by then, to mark the 50th birthday of the SNDR, there is a clear intention to recognise 1825 as the date the modern locomotive-powered railway began. LNER in 1925, followed by British Rail in 1975, and now a partnership in 2025 have continued that tradition, and it's widely taught in schools around the world, perhaps one of the few things that people anywhere know about County Durham and North East England. And so to our current plans. The first thing to emphasise that this is not just a heritage project. While the physical remains of the Stockton and Darlington Railway, its history and heritage are of international significance and a rare asset which anywhere else in the world would give its eye teeth for, it's how we use this heritage through its conservation, access and interpretation that really matters. In a very mixed area of affluence and poverty, the SNDR project can and will provide economic benefits for businesses large and small, boost the tourist economy, provide space for green exercise and zero carbon commuting, and opportunities for environmental improvement in and around the communities along the line. Through education, it's a story we hope can inspire new generations of engineers, architects and entrepreneurs, and just as it did 200 years ago, provide a positive picture of County Durham to the world. So how are we doing this? Well, a Rail Heritage Board is the main mechanism for delivering all of this. So from around 2015, a Rail Heritage Board consisting of 3 local authorities, Durham, Darlington and Stockton, 1 Metropolitan Mayor, Tees Valley Combined Authority, and a wide and growing range of partners was brought together. Over this, there is a much more focused Rail Heritage Board executive, consisting of the local authorities again, ourselves as a community representatives, Historic England, and the National Railway Museum Science Museum Group. The first thing that really sort of set things in train, forgive the pun, is in 2016, because the logical question was asked, if we've got this fantastic story and we want to make the most of it, what do we actually have left of the SNDR? So an initial heritage audit was commissioned about what remains, what condition is it in, and ideas about what we might do with it, and just how accessible is it. That was in 2016. That led to lots of people beginning to develop plans, all coordinated by the Rail Heritage Board. And very importantly, we were fortunate that Historic England were promoting their Heritage Action Zones. So we applied for and were given Heritage Action Zone status for a project running between 2018 to 2023. This was important for a whole variety of reasons, not just because of the resources it brought to the project, but because it gave it a national badge of approval, if you like. The National Heritage Agency being interested in this was really important in demonstrating to politicians and people in the North East that this was something they really ought to sit up and take notice of. In terms of what the Heritage Action Zone provided, I think Historic England would be the first to admit that they're not a cash-rich organisation. So a lot of the resources that were poured into this were staff and in kind. But importantly, they provided 50% of the funding for a project officer located with one of the local authorities. They focused their Heritage at Risk grants on several SNDR listed buildings, which were at risk at the time. They helped, through the Friends, develop learning materials for schools. Very importantly, and I think more time consuming than anyone anticipated, we undertook a designation review with Historic England to look at the current schedulings, listings and protective measures, make sure buildings that weren't currently protected were, and upgrade various other things. So that has been a major piece of work. And it's also leading the local authorities to look at how they can define a large chunk of the SNDR as a single conservation area, working across political boundaries. From our own perspective, as the Friends of the Stockton Darlington Railway, one aspect of the was a capacity grant, which allowed us to go from that loose bunch of people who met in a pub back 10 years ago to becoming an established charity. And although a lot of this is based on volunteer time, if it hadn't been for the Historic and Capacity Grant, we wouldn't have been able to do that. Through that, we've delivered all sorts of things which fed into the designation review and the Rail Heritage Board. I won't read them out, they're there on the screen in front of you. But many of these schemes, although it involved us contracting to consultants on occasion, were delivered by volunteers and touched on the lives of a lot of people. Everybody who's interested in everything from the nut and bolts and widgets of railways through to people who are interested in genealogical research, photographers, people just like walking. It's an amazingly broad church that railways can bring together, and the capacity grant was really successful in allowing us to achieve that. One of the key things we delivered were what we called walking the line projects, where we got people to do research on individual branch lines, take them out on site, identify new things which fed into the local historic environment records. We produced, based on those, self-guided walk leaflets, which are both something that generates income for us now in terms of hard copy, or can be downloaded for free from our website. Essentially, because we're building for the future, it allowed us to produce learning materials for Key Stage 1 and 2 for primary schools and begin doing lots of interesting schools work. Because ultimately, as with a lot of heritage things, our membership is aging, and we really need to get the younger generation aware of their heritage, even if they don't actively participate in it. It's just that level of understanding. We diversified and did things we never thought we would do in terms of sorts of activities, everything from fairs, guided tours, street theatre. We suddenly found that a lot of people who'd never actually acted before were quite keen on doing guided walks in costume and doing plays and writing scripts. So the opportunity it provided for volunteers were many and varied. The key thing, which is drawing a lot of this together, along the line, there are 3 existing museums, which I'll talk about a little about in future. There is Locomotion at Shildon, Darlington Rail Heritage Quarter, and a museum at Preston Park in Stockton. But how do you connect them together? Part of it is still a live line, but what we wanted to do was allow people to walk the bits that are abandoned and connect it all together to make it feel like a whole. So a walking cycling route was the method we took. And that's been incredibly beneficial in terms of drawing a whole, again, new audiences into it. And by 2025, when we have a bicentenary, it won't be the ideal route, but it will be a perfectly good route. And along it, what we've tried to do, working again with consultants, is develop a consistent brand. Dreadful word, but that's the way you do it. Again, so that all the local authorities, ourselves and others who are promoting the railway, have that consistent approach all the way along the 26 miles. The museums have their own identity, but the connections between them speak Stockton and Darlington Railway, which we think is a really important thing in drawing the whole thing together. Along with that brand, there is a whole load of interpretation being provided, which will be both traditional in terms of interpretation boards, but will also be digital as well, because without that, we're just not going to get the information across to people. So there'll be a whole suite of augmented reality and virtual reality things which you'll be able to access on your phone through QR codes and the like as you travel along the line. So for 2025, this should all be in place by early 2025. We hope to have a really good offer for people who are just either casually walking the countryside, who will come to the northeast and want to do the full 26 miles and spend a number of days looking at museums and things. So on the subject of the museums, I can only touch on this very briefly, but Science Museum Group, National Railway Museum, have Locomotion Museum at Shildon. There is a modern end of the site, if you like, which is a large shared, purpose-built shed, a lot of fantastic stuff in it, including early railway locomotives. There's a new extension to that being built, which will make it the single largest undercover exhibition of railway museum items, certainly in Western Europe, possibly the world. And then there's a historic end of the site, which includes lots of really important early railway buildings from the 1820s and 1830s. So many of those have been restored between Durham County Council and Science Museum Group, and the whole thing works, or should work, very well as a fantastic co-entity between the two parts. Those are some of the buildings that have been restored over the last few years. I could do you a lecture on each one of them, but sadly we don't have time today. At Darlington, Darlington have again a fantastic collection of early railway buildings, most of them from the 1830s or early 40s, but there are other sort of fragmentary things from earlier. It's been a museum since 1975. It's still on a live line, but they were very fortunate, and we'll talk about funding in a little while, to get a major grant through the Tees Valley Mayor. So they're spending in the region of £40 million on this site, making it much different, but still focusing on things like free access, with only certain aspects of it being paid, but including the community in it. Funding. So to some degree, the question is, how do you fund all this? When we started it, this was a pre-Brexit, pre-COVID world, really, with a relatively healthy economy. How things have changed. Things we thought would pay for a lot of this, such as the European Union Regional Development Fund, clearly just don't exist anymore. So it's been a very inventive learning curve, I think, in terms of how the funding for this has all been brought together. Some of it has been fortuitous, some of it has been inspirational, and whatever funding you find for Liverpool and Manchester will probably be different, although some things will become the same. So we have local authority capital support, again, a diminishing resource. The Heritage Action Zone provided really important seed corn for a lot of this. COVID Recovery Fund, a lot of the institutions, including ourselves, made use of that to actually keep ourselves going and invest in things. Levelling up grants from central government. A lot of the walking and cycling route is being paid for through that. Another government pot of money called Towns Fund, these things appear and disappear with amazing regularity, is paying for some quite major works in Darlington. Planning and developer contributions. Where there is development next to the SNDR, we usually have a say in planning matters, but the planning authorities have been great in working with us to get developer contributions towards things. And of course, the obvious candidates, people like National Lottery Heritage Fund, they've been engaged on a number of smaller projects and have given at least one major grant for a substantial 5-year project based on the Darlington Rail Heritage Quarter site, but which importantly provides 3 support officers working along the 26 miles and a community grant scheme of around £200,000, which will be rolling out over the next 4 years. In 2025, this is all leading to it, but clearly we'll talk about legacy afterwards. In 2025, there will be a single big festival, and there have been lots of ideas for that knocking around for several years, but I think the key lesson there is that until the festival director, a lady called Nikki Halifax, was appointed earlier this year, that's what really began to draw it together and make it into a coherent programme. So the festival director will be is working this programme up. It will be a festival that lasts over several months, culminating on the 27th of September 2025 with our bicentenary. And it won't be just something, again, which focuses purely on railways. It will involve arts, learning, engineering, all sorts of things to attract wide audiences beyond just the specialist one. Of course, railways and trains are the heartblood of all this, so we're certainly not ignoring them. This, as people will point out, is not actually locomotion number 1. This is a replica of one of the Wylam engines up at Beamish, but the carriages behind it, the little one at the back, you can see, which has got S&DR written on it, there will be a refurbishment of a 1975 locomotion number 1 replica and a new train of carriages which will travel along the line over a 3-day festival in September 2025, around which there will be lots of other events. So that's our main focal point in recreating what actually happened in 1825. What happened in 1975, which was only a few years after the end of live steam on British Rail, just can't happen again because of health and safety and a whole variety of things. And again, if you have any aspirations for that, I'd suggest you need early and very detailed and long consultations with Network Rail to get anywhere at all about allowing steam engines back on to a live line, which can be closed for a period of time. But Network Rail will be fantastically helpful, but it's been a long, drawn-out, very complicated process for that. On that subject, Lord Sir Peter Hendy, who's chair of Network Rail, is also promoting this project, the 200 years of rail travel, which they want to celebrate nationwide over 2025, with the idea that it will all culminate as a celebration in the Northeast in September. But that project is ongoing at the moment. There are various discussions going with DCMS about how that might roll out across the country. But I think there's an aspiration there that every railway station, every heritage railway will do something during 2025 to celebrate those 200 years of train travel. In terms of, whoops, I've gone the wrong way there. In terms of long-term management, clearly an important factor of all of this for us is that we don't just have a huge party in 2025 after all this money has been spent, and then afterwards things are left to go to rack and ruin and nothing really happens. There was an element of that after 1975. And one of the key things about the Friends is that we're looking at that long-term legacy together with all our partners. So what we hope to do is, working with our partners, is very much to start looking at that long-term management. How do we actually keep all of this stuff which is being put into good condition in good heart? How do we keep all those volunteers motivated and recruit new ones? How do we develop how do we develop a business plan which actually delivers all of that and is affordable? Local government is under increasingly difficult situation with financing. Grants are not as easy to get as they used to be. Heritage Fund is hugely oversubscribed. So the question really for us is, how do we develop a business plan which allows good quality, high quality professional work to go on, supported by volunteers, but is affordable? So the situation at the moment is that the local authorities have agreed with us that we will collectively put in a bid to Heritage Lottery Fund for Business and Sustainability Grant, which will try and develop that business plan. And it's going to have to be quite inventive, because it's going to have to capture a lot of things all the partners want. We're just going to have to look at buildings like this, for instance. This is Hyington Station, arguably the world's earliest railway station. Again, like so much on the SNDR, not the fully formed article, but built by a railway company for passengers by the side of a railway. At the moment, it looks like that. It's at risk and has no obvious future. But potentially, in terms of attracting business, attracting people in, that could be a fantastic Georgian-themed railway inn, which could provide finances into the long-term upkeep of the line. There are other heritage buildings we would like to see reused in terms of things like Airbnbs, bed and breakfast, a whole variety of things. So the business plan is really important in actually capturing everything we need to do and looking inventively about how that can be sustained into the future, so that when visitors come from us from anywhere around the world, the communities and the people here can take advantage of it. Those wider business plans, the building top left is a former house owned by the Pease family, where a lot of railway planning went on back in the day. It's now a hotel. We've got a number of craft breweries, all who are interested in promoting beers themed on railways. We've got the Mill Kitchen, which is a farm shop, but it's right next door to the line. We've got a local company who now have set up a shop thing called the Railway Station Shop, which sells gifts and artisan crafts things based on railway heritage. So all of these things feed into a wider economy and support from local communities, and again produce income which hopefully keeps the railway managed and all that hard work and interpretation in place for years to come. So in terms of lessons that we could pass on to you today, it's a very different world to 1825, but one where railways are just as important, perhaps more so, for a low carbon and efficient transport for the future. Most everyone in the UK has an association with the railway through work, family, or just travel. And across the country, heritage railways are still big business and of huge interest. So celebrating this heritage is something that can appeal to a mass audience. Here in the Northeast, we have a number of heritage engineering companies prospering in both Darlington and Shildon, while between them, Hitachi build trains of the future right next door to the 1825 line. There's a significant public and community interest, but it's not just purely a heritage story and opportunity. Just as in 1825, we want to ensure the railway is used to improve lives. Today, it may be through amazing visitor attractions and the tourist economy, people caring for their own community environment, or through education and the inspiration a 200-year-old story can bring to future generations of engineers, architects, entrepreneurs, artists, brewers even, and many others. What would the key lessons been? Well, here's a shortish list. Make the most of your moment in the spotlight to gain funding and political support. Bicentenaries don't come along that often. Lay solid foundations in research and claims so you're confident in your story and how this fits into a bigger picture of not just railway history, but British history, warts and all. Don't be shy. Knock on everyone's door. It's amazing where you'll find support. Be aware that working through local and central government is not quick. Indeed, don't underestimate how long anything will take to achieve. Manage your volunteers and supporters' expectations appropriately, because keeping that enthusiasm going is difficult. Be inventive with your funding, work with others, not all of whom may be obvious partners. This won't just be a core railway heritage audience, but will include developers, wildlife trusts, green exercise, commuting, and many others. Build and plan for the future. Schools, education, pride in where people live, and ensuring you get appropriate policies into local plans, and ensuring those heritage that deserve it are designated are key things in sustaining what you're trying to achieve. Never underestimate the ability, skills, and power of volunteers. Do it at your peril, and always see yourself as part of a bigger picture. So here's to our railway heritage, an amazing and continuing story, and one we as partners have a singular opportunity to take full advantage of, to create both an inspiring international event in 2025 and a lasting legacy beyond. And perhaps most importantly, to see this as part of a wider picture of how the UK gave the world the railway. After 2025, we very much hope to pass the torch of celebration to your good selves in Liverpool and Manchester, and to continue telling our fantastic shared story of invention and innovation to the wider world. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks very much, Niall. That was amazing. Really, really enjoyed that, and certainly made me want to travel up to the northeast in not in 1825, in 2025. Fantastic, really, lots of very good lessons and lots of similarities as well. Certainly the issues that we will face trying to do anything in Merseyside are going to be very parallel to what you've had. And thank you for being so generous in sharing all that. Nobody's put any questions on the chat, I don't think. Have they? Just double checking. Is that because people don't know how to do it?
It's just ask people to raise their hand if you want to just try and take in questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Has anyone got any questions they would like to ask? Let me kick off with one then. Sorry, Rosemary, yeah, do you want to ask your question? Sorry, you have to unmute yourself. Okay, no, you're still muted. Hang on a minute, let's see if I can do it.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes.
We can hear you now.
Yeah, I wasn't allowed to because, of course, obviously we'd all been muted. And I kept getting the message, you're muted, because the organizer wanted to be muted. Right, just very quickly, I was interested in is it a replica steam carriage, the engine?
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking, as you know, of our own trials. It was obviously before 1830 when the railway began running here.
1829, yeah.
It was 1829 the shares were set up, yes, and they started. But the Rainford trials, George, oh, my mind's going, Stephenson, yes, from the northeast. Was it made by Stephenson, do you know, the actual original engine?
Rainhill Trials 1829. There were a number of engines. There were a number of engines competed in that.
That's right.
The winner, Rocket,
yes.
It was produced by Robert Stephenson and Co in Newcastle.
Mm-hmm.
So Robert is George's son, and Robert is usually attributed as the one who came up with the vast improvements that Rocket provided over earlier engines with multi-tubular boilers and things. You know, clearly there are others who were thinking along the same lines, but yes, it was built in Newcastle and brought to Rainhill.
Lovely. Okay, so this is your engine, is the same one, that model?
No, the engines which were delivered to the Stockton and Darlington 6 years before were an earlier design. So they're not as fast, they're big and chunky, but for the majority of the traffic on the S&DR, which was mineral traffic, they were ideal because they were fairly reliable. They didn't need to go that fast. In fact, it would have been dangerous if they'd gone much faster because of the conditions of track in those days.
Thank you very much. Sorry if you covered that, but we missed the beginning of the talk.
Okay.
Anyway, thanks a lot.
Can I just ask a question now? Have you done any estimates of the economic impact of the event, of the 1825? The bicentenary?
Yes.
And Have you got an evaluation program sort of planned for the year?
I can't give you any figures right now, but one of the things that was undertaken, because we got quite a long way along with the Rail Heritage Board structure, actually identifying projects and things. And then clearly we needed at some point to persuade the politicians to actually put money into this from the local authorities. So there was an economic impact assessment commissioned, and I can send you a copy of it. I don't think it's confidential. I think I can send you a copy of it just to make the case that for the amount of investment that's going into this, what would be the outcomes. In terms of evaluation, there will be an evaluation of the 2025 festival, and there is an evaluation of the National Lottery Heritage Fund grant. Whether there's a wider assessment of that, I don't know.
Okay, thank you for that.
But certainly that there had to be an EIA earlier on, just to make the case for why on earth should the local authorities put all this money into the project.
Certainly, yeah, understandable. Sarah Jane, you wanted to ask a question. Are you unmuted? Sorry, my screen's gone a bit strange.
Yeah, I am, thanks. My screen's entirely strange, so apologies if I don't actually manage to appear, but
I don't know what's happened here.
right, it's coming, it's just a little bit slow. Ancient Mac. Anyway, sorry if I can't appear, Niall, but hello, it's Sarah Jane Farr. I used to be the
Hello, I remember you, yes.
Hello, yeah, it's lovely to
Are
see
you well?
Yeah, I'm well, thanks.
Good.
I'm actually working on a very large railway, which will possibly no longer be coming to Manchester. So I have an interest across the spectrum. And, you know, something that takes me back from running a historic environment record is, I wondered if, and sorry if I missed it, did you have any sort of pilot projects with some pilot grant to sort of look at particular areas to gauge, you know, the potential for identifying specific heritage, and with volunteers? So were there any sort of little pilot projects to help test the level of heritage assets information and also the volunteer interest?
Yeah, I mean, the volunteer interest sort of grew organically in some ways. But early on, I think I covered it early on, but the Rail Heritage Board, when it first got established, commissioned a piece of work in 2016, which was an initial sort of audit of what might be there. And because of the way that was delivered, we also managed to get a small Heritage Lottery Fund grant at the time. So we sort of combined that bit of consultancy work with volunteer work to get people out on the ground looking at things, which again helped improve the number of volunteers. So the two things sort of went hand in hand over a period of about 6 months. So it was led by consultants, but included volunteer groups actually doing historic map research and then going out on the ground and looking to see what might be there.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions? Any contributions? If not questions, you'd like to make a contribution? As there's not quite as many of us as we might have had. I think we can open it up.
I think we might have muted Sarah Jane again, Pam. I don't know whether she wanted to come back.
Into. I'm just going to try and unmute everyone and just see what happens. For some reason, it won't let me do that. Allow participants to mute themselves. Yes, that's what I want. Right, you can now unmute yourselves, I think, if you need to. Right, Sarah Jane, sorry.
Just to say thanks, Pam, and Dot, really doing an amazing job. And I hate Zoom. So thanks, Niall. And you know, I think as our civic society, I'm actually a member of Civic Society, Merseyside Civic Society, as a council member. That's the most important thing to mention. Oh. And got an amazing bunch of people here and new people we haven't met. And I just think that the starting point, if we've all got the energy, is to do a little bit of work ourselves or think about that, and definitely buy a small pilot project. And because I suppose from my view, we're talking about heritage assets, then that covers the massive conurbations of Manchester and Liverpool. And I think a very important sort of gatherer of goodwill and funding and ideas will be possibly with a bit of support from Historic England, even if it's just to help get parties together. So I kind of got a little comment for our historic England rep as well, to see, or attendee, to see how that might work, and have they done similar projects of getting sort of adjacent historic environment records and local authorities together to do something similar already? Not a railway project, or have anybody in the Northwest team done anything pretty similar to this?
I think if you were thinking of kicking that off in terms of the way we started, that although the local authorities put some money into that initial sort of heritage audit, the Heritage Lottery Fund bit was just one of their small grants up to 10k, and that allowed a lot of participation and a lot of initial map research and getting people out on the ground looking at things and just raising awareness. So I mean, anything I've mentioned in this talk, even if people want to get in touch afterwards, I can send you copies of documents and things we did, so you can plagiarize them or use them in any way you want, really. So,
well, thank you. Julie, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, sorry, I'll just pop in, Sarah Jane, and just say, obviously have a conversation with us. We do capacity building, as Niall mentioned, and obviously we hold a lot of information as well. So once you have an idea about what you're looking to do, then please get in touch. And obviously the Rocket guiding group also exists, and they have already undertaken some consultation work. So I think there's conversations to be had across the whole project as well, because Manchester, Liverpool, but also all those wonderful bits in between as well.
I'm just wondering whether we can put Andrea on the spot. Andrea, would you be able to, if she's there, let's have a look. There she is. Sorry, you keep moving around the screen. I can't find you.
I think Sally McDonald's here as well from the Railway Museum, which is also part of the guiding group.
Great, yeah. Do you want to just say a few words about what's happening at the moment then, Andrea?
Yes, okay. So there's a group of committed individuals, which includes the Science Museum Manchester, which obviously has the 1830 station on its estate, National Museums Liverpool, Metal, who are based at Edge Hill Station, local authority representation from Liverpool and Manchester councils, Ian Ray, who is there as an independent but obviously closely connected to this group. Sally, have I forgotten anybody else? Anyway, a group of people who came together about 1.5 years ago, I think, originally, to start to think about how this part of the world could think about the project for 2030. And I've been engaged with them to help deliver a sort of feasibility about what they could do and how they might organise it. And the group has just accepted that report, and it's now going to be recruiting a chair and thinking about its wider governance, funding and activity plan. Sorry, it's convened by Manchester Histories, who are part of Manchester University. Sally, I don't know if you're there, whether you've got anything to add. You certainly, I know you were on the line.
I can't. Sorry, are you there, Sally?
Like a Ouija board, isn't it?
I can't see Sally coming up at the moment.
Just kind of in terms of your question, the group is busy sort of thinking about what next and how.
Oh, we can't hear you very well, Andrea.
Oh dear. Well, they're busy working on what next and how, and the next stage of community consultation. So we can keep the group informed about how that's going, and what next to do. I mean, I reckon by the new year they will have a very clear plan about what they're up to.
Very good.
That's great news. And I think just saying a few words about Merseyside Civic Society's role in this. What we don't want to, what we want to do is try and be a bit of an umbrella organisation to represent some of the community groups and railway heritage groups. That's what we're trying to do. All we're doing at the moment is building up a database, and that's the plan. That because it's quite hard for individual small groups to sort of maybe have that same level of consultation as everyone else. So we're trying to position ourselves as doing that. But obviously we await with interest, the appointment of the chair and the consultative events that are going to take place, I think, before March. And our only plea really is to make sure it's very inclusive and it's not just focused on Liverpool and Manchester. And I appreciate that's where the sort of impetus is coming. But I'm sure, you know, the community, we're very keen that any celebration of the bicentenary in Liverpool and Manchester Railway should be rooted within the local community. We're also very keen to make sure it's not just a one-off sort of showpiece event, but just as Niall was saying, let's make sure there's a proper legacy and that heritage ends up in a better condition at the end of it all. I think we all aspire to that. Yeah, to make sure that there's something we can really sort of take from it for the wider area and work together, you know, on it. And we're very happy to provide, you know, that conduit, if you like, for community groups. So if people are on here as individuals and not actually involved with the Merseyside Civic Society, please just drop me a line at secretary@merseysidecivicsociety.org. And we'll put you on the list. You know, we're not asking you to commit anything at this stage, but just to keep in touch. And we're very keen, particularly some of the communities in the sort of St Helens Borough area. They've got a big story to tell, you know, and a lot of the assets are concentrated in that area. And we really want to make sure that people feel involved in what's going on and can contribute their ideas as well to what shape the celebration ultimately takes.
Yeah, absolutely, Pam. And as part of the role that I've been playing, we've done a lot of consulting with the places along the line and the groups around that. So I think we'll obviously keep you closely looped in to what's happening. And thank you very much for all the interest.
Does anyone else want to make any other contributions?
I would like to ask.
Sorry,
conflict of interest.
Brian Dermot.
So I would like to ask whether there is any work going on to the Liverpool end of the Liverpool-Manchester Railway, and in particular work at Edge Hill on the restoration of the Wapping Tunnel, which I have visited unofficially a few years ago.
Who's the best person to answer? I just wonder, Eric, I know you've got a big interest in this area. Is that something you'd be able to tell us? I don't know whether he's there.
Well, I raise it anyhow as an interesting prospect.
Eric, yeah, here we are.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know whether Eric's still muted, I think. I don't know whether he wants to say anything.
No. It was as one of the friends of Williamson's tunnels that I was shown part of the Wapping Tunnel. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say that, but anyhow, that was the case.
Yeah, can I come in here? Are you all hearing me now?
Yes.
Oh, Eric, is that you, Eric?
Yeah, it is me, yes, yeah. As I tried to explain, I had huge technical difficulties, which took 20 minutes off Niall's obviously excellent presentation. So I'm clueless as to what he actually said.
I'll make sure you receive the recording, Eric.
I will be looking forward to that immensely, Pam. Right, can I just say my position here? In 2015, a group of us in Liverpool decided that we would do a lot of research into the background of the Liverpool and Manchester Railway. And we formed a group of trustees and called ourselves the Liverpool and Manchester Railway Trust. So a lot of research has been done in the records down in Kew and in Liverpool and in Shropshire and so on. So we've got a huge amount of information. One of the major things I was involved in was in 2018, I submitted an application to Historic England to have the cutting at Edge Hill finally listed and in fact scheduled as a monument. And this was in fact approved in 2021 or 22, I think it was. Now we have managed to get access to the cutting and the tunnels that you mentioned. The thing is, Network Rail do not really encourage visitors at all. It is a working cutting. There are 2 tracks and a hedge shunt there. The cutting is full of vegetation. There are lots of trip hazards there and such like. And trying to get Network Rail to go along with any visits is very, very difficult. So we keep like a watching brief on what is happening in the cutting, mainly to get the vegetation sorted out. But Network Rail claim they haven't got the funds anymore to help cut down the vegetation, which is obviously destroying the excavations that were done in 1976 to 1980. Now, you mentioned specifically the tunnels. Now, we have actually walked the Wapping Tunnel, and for the most part, the Wapping Tunnel is in excellent condition. However, the lower part, as you get towards the Wapping end of it, is flooded, and it is impossible to walk through. You have got about 6-8 feet of water. At the very bottom end of the Wapping Tunnel, the cutting opens out into the open air, and there are 3 separate tunnels. That part has become a dumping ground. It's atrocious when you see what has happened, because back in 1974, I photographed down there. There used to be a signal box set into the wall of the cutting. There has been that much fly tipping and other sort of works being done down there that signal box, which once stood about 10 feet above ground level, is now completely hidden practically. If you go to the Edgehill end of the tunnel, it is all guarded by security gates. So obviously they do not want anyone really going down there for their own safety. There is a drain in the center of the tunnel, which Stevens had put in when the tunnel was built in 1828. And this is obviously a trip hazard. All the tracks have been removed, but the actual strata in that tunnel is beautiful. Now, if you go to our Facebook pages, we haven't got a website, unfortunately, but we do have a very active Facebook group, which tries to integrate interests between Liverpool and Manchester. And we have quite a good repartee between people posting various things on it. We have lots and lots of photographs showing the Wapping Tunnel, and also the small passenger tunnel that ran through for the passenger carriages that were rolled through from Crown Street Station in the early days. So my short answer to you about the tunnels is both those tunnels are owned by Liverpool Council, not Network Rail. But the actual cutting itself is still owned by Network Rail, and they run traffic into that, so they can't allow any public access. Now, we have had someone draw up a plan of how that cutting could be landscaped, and obviously I'd want to discuss this in more detail with the Civic Society as time gets nearer towards the celebrations for the 200th. But I think I've said enough here. If anyone has any questions they wish to ask me, please do. I'm now obviously live, at least with the audio, so thank you.
Thanks very much, Eric. I'm pleased I asked you to reply to that. I know you're the expert, our resident expert on everything to do with the certainly Liverpool end anyway, probably the whole railway. Has anyone else got any more questions?
Could I make 1 or 2 points?
Yeah, Adrian.
And ask Niall. There's the engineering aspect, and there's the whole historic background to the promoters. And I think that's very interesting in connection with the Liverpool-Manchester line. We've heard about the Wapping Tunnel, and that's important. But there's another important element along the line, and that was the development of the world's first locomotive construction works at Newton-le-Willows, Earlstown, and was also the development of a factory village for the people who worked in the factory. I think it's St Helens Council have developed something called the Newton Heritage Trail that takes in the site of the works and where the factory village is. To what extent have you focused upon the engineering importance of what has taken, what took place, and I mean involvement of various professional institutes on that? And I think I went to an event in Newcastle several years ago, and I think there is a Stevenson research or group or something. I picked up one or two of their publications. So could I ask you about all of that element and the importance of the engineering side?
Gosh, where to start? Yeah, I mean, it's such, I mean, railways are such a complicated story, because I mean, apart from mechanical engineering, there's a huge amount of civil engineering.
Yeah.
There's the whole financial side of these things, about how the money was actually put together. So in terms of engaging with various groups, there aren't enough hours in the day, frankly, but clearly it's all part of the story. So in terms of the, I think the group you're probably referring to, the Stevenson Locomotive Society.
That's right, yes.
Who are based in Newcastle. So yes, we're in contact with them, and clearly last year they had their celebration of the setting up of the Stevenson Locomotive Works in Newcastle. So that was their bicentenary, effectively. So all of these things connect together, but the problem is there just aren't enough hours in the day to try and make the most of all these links. I mean, the Institution of Civil Engineers, both regionally and nationally, are clearly very interested in the story. Clearly, I can't remember, George or Robert was their first presiding president. They actually are slightly later in being set up than the Stockton Darlington. So they're going through their archives at the moment to see what they've got on early railways, but it predates their foundation, unless things people deposited afterwards. But yes, it's what we've been trying to do is establish, and this will ring bells with our friends at Historic England, is put together what's called a research agenda. So together with groups like the Early Railways Conference, who have been running for several years now, conferences about every 2 years. The next one will be in Darlington in 2025, is to look at what are the questions about early railways, largely to do with engineering from their perspective, where we've got answers and where are the gaps. Because it is a huge field to continue exploring. I mean, one of the things we would love to see happen is that, and it's probably the same, Eric probably mentioned about archives a minute ago, in the Kew Public Record Office, National Archives, there is a huge body of information on the Stockton Darlington Railway, Rail 667, if you want to go and look at it under its and it all needs digitising, because the number of people who go there and do research and just repeat the fact someone's probably been in the week before, if we could get that digitized and put online, it would be a boon to anybody who's looking into how a lot of these things were looked at originally. So the research side of this, whether it's conventional engineering, if you like, or whether it's the finances and things, they're all subjects which we've dipped our toes into, but it's such a huge subject, it will probably go on for many, many years to come.
Thank you.
I'm going to finish things there. We said we finished at 1:30, and it's just about there now. I think we could probably have gone on for quite a while, but I just want to mention a couple of things that come in on the chat. First of all, thank you, Niall, for your comment about you say, I'll just read this out. In supporting the community effort, we found having the Friends of the Stockton and Darlington Railway as an umbrella providing insurance, bank account, grant application services, etc., has been a huge boon to supporting smaller local community groups and removing from them all that dull bureaucracy and letting them get on with what they like doing. Each local group has a memorandum of understanding with the FSDR to formalise the relationship. That sounds good. And then Chia Lin has just mentioned that she's doing a lot of work on railway history. She's a lecturer at the University of Liverpool. She's actually on the Civic Society Council as well. And she'd be very interested to work with anyone that, and she's put the website address there to find, for you to find out more about it. And she says she also used Edge Hill stations as a student project to revive the area. And Sarah Jane's mentioned some work that Historic England have done on different railway lines. So I think that's just about it. But so thank you very much. As I mentioned, I will be, if the recording has worked okay, fingers crossed, I'll be including that in the newsletter that goes out to our members. If anyone specifically wants to receive it, who's on this call now, if you just email me, secretary@merseyside-civic-society.org, and I will send it through to you. Give me a couple of days to sort out the technology to get it onto YouTube and in a way that I can send to you. But thank you very much, and big thanks to Niall. Very generous in both the information you shared and your time. And yes, please, if you could send me whatever information you think might be useful, I'd be very happy to be a repository for that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think this is the beginning of a conversation, because it's so it's two parts of the same fantastic story, the Northeast and the Northwest. So
if nothing else, we must organise a visit during 1825.
Very much, yeah.
Yes.
Glad to help out with that.
Yeah, so we're definitely all, I think the Civic Society might have to leave Merseyside on that occasion, come up and have a look at what you're doing. Yeah. Okay, thanks everyone, and I'll end the call now.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
And Niall, thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Well done, Pam.